Vinaka Tamani, Vinaka. I actually can't see if my video is on or not. So, okay, I can see it now. All right. Bula Vinaka, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm dialing in from Nam, also known as Melbourne. I'm here for some work, but it's really great to be on the online space. Maybe one thing that I want to say before I proceed with sharing some of my thoughts and views around the topic is that midway through my presentation, I do share short detail about a case that outlines violence. So it may be distressing for some people, but when we come to that point, I'll again put out a content warning so people are aware when it's gonna come on. Maybe the first thing I want to begin with by sharing on the word coercion used in the sense of reproductive coercion. I've always never fully grasped or supported the use of coercion, and today I wanted to just share and maybe highlight why. I just feel that the word reproductive coercion does not fully or adequately capture the extent of harm and abuse that is perpetrated within this paradigm. Whilst this term is, frequently used in discourse, I mean, as opposed to terms like reproductive violence or reproductive abuse or reproductive harm, I feel like because of the word coercion, it does not get the needed attention, especially in our region, but it is also a major gap in the legal system to address. For example, and this is very similar with nearly all the domestic violence legislations that some of our Pacific Island countries have, including Fiji, but specifically making a reference to Fiji. In Fiji, the domestic violence laws don't stipulate coercive control in any way or form. There's no use of the word coercive control as a form of domestic violence, but many of us on this online forum, through our own lived realities and experience, and also through the work we do recognize how it is such a huge part of intimate partner violence or domestic violence situation. So because it's not stipulated and because of the use of coercion in reproductive coercion such as, it becomes really challenging to access justice or the legal system. Because of the interlinkages with domestic violence and intimate partner relationship, we all know that reproductive abuse or violence is quite high and prevalent, but just the lack of awareness and understanding, including in the legal systems. Just from my experience in providing legal support to a lot of women and people experiencing intimate partner violence and have experienced different forms of reproductive abuse or harm, they usually don't even disclose it in the legal forms, or they don't disclose it in the affidavits. But when you have conversations with them, it always comes up. However, you don't see the reproductive abuse experiences in a lot of the legal applications. And I just wanted to put this out there for something for us to think about as we continue these conversations. How can we mainstream? How can we bring it within the paradigm of domestic violence, within the paradigm of intimate partner relationship, reproductive abuse and harm? I mean, in my very own community, emotional abuse and even withdrawal of physical and emotional support to coerce women to get pregnant or have children is very prevalent. And not only from the intimate partners, but also from extended family members, including the in-laws. And, I see these women in my community, losing control and agency of themselves, and sharing the frustration, etc. But then they give in, and from the work we do, we recognize this is a form of reproductive abuse, but it never gets articulated as such. So sometimes it becomes difficult to address it not only within the legal space, but also within the advocacy space in communities. It's a short story I wanted to also share. Just very recently over the weekend, I met a friend of mine who's not from my community, but is an expat working in Fiji. And she's in a relationship, got coerced into a traditional marriage, as the men's culture frowned upon children before marriage. My friend wanted children, she wants children, but the pressure now on her to have a child is of another level. The man's mother has physically and emotionally abused her for not giving her son a child yet, to the extent the mother, who's a doctor, even got her medicines to take to prepare her for IVF without any discussions or consultations with my friend whether she wanted IVF or not. And both these people are not from communities or any ethnic group in Fiji, the expats working, but this form of reproductive abuse is more common than we realize. We have women living with shame, guilt, lots of acute anxiety, stress, and self-blame. And I see this, with a lot of women I work with, or even friends, the self-blame and the shame and the guilt is so intense that it is actually crippling them in terms of functioning in other aspects of their life. And obviously, all of this is compounded or only present, if you're not able to have a child, and the pressure, or you don't want to have a child, but the pressure to have one is, compounded further because of the actions by the intimate partner or their family. And again, a total loss of control and agency. And obviously, all of this combined, etc., really makes it hard to live an abusive relationship. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I just want to touch on a recent case in Fiji, and I want to say that it is not an uncommon case. This case, we have had similar cases over the years in Fiji, not one to more than like several dozen. Also, there are a few cases in other Pacific Island countries, but it touches on so many aspects of reproductive and sexual rights and health. And this is where I'm going to share some details around violence, very short details that was outlined in the case by the court, and it may be disturbing for some people. So recently in Fiji, there was a woman who was charged with murder for accidentally cutting the neck of a newborn child as she tried to cut the umbilical cord, which was around the baby's neck. She has been jailed for life. She was charged with murder. And she has been given a non-parole period of 9 years. Now, interestingly, the aggravating factors taken into the sentencing by the judge was that she concealed her pregnancy from her husband, that she secretly gave birth, and that the judge said she was reckless of taking immense risk by not attending pregnancy medical clinics during the gestation period as required of pregnant women, and concurrently endangering her own life as well. So these were the aggravating factors that the court took into consideration to charge her with murder instead of reducing the sentence to infanticide, which is present within our criminal code. Again, problematic, but just looking at it from the current legal system. And there was no mitigating factors that was highlighted. So the aggravating factors were of many, and the most, and the patriarchal irony of this is that the aggravating factor of concurrently endangering her own life as well, that's taken into consideration to give her a life sentence, to jail her for life. So whilst you took that as an aggravating factor that she put her own life at risk, or her own life, or endangered her own life, you're taking away her life. And this is how sometimes patriarchy or patriarchal legal systems and justice system works. And the entire the justice system took her entire life with this sentence. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's so many elements to this case that reek of patriarchy, oppression, injustice, and the total disregard to the socio-cultural context in which women are living in and how this affects our choices, the options we have, the decisions that we make. And then the most obvious, the most obvious mitigating circumstances or factor that was missing was the mental health aspect. In my opinion, this case makes it very acute, makes it very pronounced, it draws out so many complexities in the way patriarchy, has its boot on our neck and takes away our agency over our own bodies. Firstly, by limiting comprehensive rights-based sex education in schools, or even the little they have in some of our schools, it's not delivered in a rights-based approach. The teachers are not trained, they just handed a curriculum. So it's very problematic in the way it's delivered. Again, not having accessible and affordable emergency contraceptive pills, especially in our rural dispensaries and pharmacies. And the distance sometimes to get these pills from a pharmacy, is also quite a lot for people in the rural areas. But I also should say that there's very limited awareness on the emergency contraceptive pills, hence the uptake too is quite limited. And then weaponizing religion and culture against women and creating moral dilemmas that affect the decision-making autonomy of women, criminalizing abortion or procedures, or having restrictive procedures around abortion, forcing women to take drastic measures to gain control over their own bodies, and then punishing women for trying to gain any form of agency over their decisions or their bodies. What was also quite disturbing was the way that the online community reacted to this case. And it was very recent, so it's, I am still quite horrified by just everything, and that's why I thought I'll share it today, just because of the complexities, and the way that the topic is so, the way that this case brings out the topic in such a cute way. But it was also with deep sadness the way I saw that majority people reacted to this case, women and men alike. Nearly everyone was blaming her. People were uploading the court decision. So many people were feeling sorry and expressing sympathy and showing empathy for the baby. But there was no empathy and consideration being shown at all to the woman, or what she must have been going through or went through, to conceal the pregnancy, to give birth secretly, her health, not even mental, physical health, not even factoring in any of this sympathy and empathy that was being expressed online. There was so much care and concern for the newborn, but not for this woman who has lived life and has relations and memories and is part of the community. So for me, that was really startling, just the way I saw the online community reacting. And I want to say that this is not an isolated case, and there are many similar cases like this, but absolutely nothing is being done to change the status quo to prevent such incidents. Now, related topic, and I want to shift now a bit on abortion. In many Pacific Island countries, abortion is outright criminalized. Fiji has a law. I want to make reference to the Fiji law just to bring home a point, which I'll emphasize at the end. But Fiji has a law which says that abortion is justified if serious danger, that's what written in our law, if serious danger to the physical and mental health of the woman concerned, if abortion is not performed, or if the pregnancy of the woman is causing serious danger to her physical or mental health. Now, the law further goes to say that informed consent has to be given by the woman for abortion to be allowed under those circumstances of serious danger to the physical and mental health. And then it goes to define informed consent. Informed consent is defined as it has to be given by the, it has to be through a medical practitioner who has given her counseling on the medical risk of termination and of carrying the pregnancy to term. And then the medical practitioner referring her to appropriate and adequate counseling on termination and on carrying pregnancy to term. So even the way informed consent is obtained, or what informed consent entails, is so prescriptive. So this is a procedural legal restriction to women's right to safe abortion, and making women, depend on a liberal or benevolent interpretation of this law, or of this, procedural part of the law. It effectively takes away our autonomy. It does not safeguard us. It does the exact opposite. Now, even when women's physical or mental health is in serious danger, healthcare workers fear prosecution and stigmatization for terminating pregnancies. And this is because of the very heavy Christianization of our healthcare systems, which means healthcare workers are not empowered. Healthcare workers, healthcare providers do not look at the laws objectively, but through a moral Christian lens, and deny women abortion. Now, this culture in the healthcare sector also generates fear among women to seek abortion services, even when their mental health is in danger or serious danger, and it results in women being forced to pursue unsafe abortions or hide their pregnancies. And in the end, we see them being prosecuted and punished for either infanticide or murder. And this kind of, this culture, looking at abortion from a very moralistic Christian perspective, very patriarchal, is very prevalent in all our Pacific Island countries. And it's not only leading to the stigmatization of women and girls by healthcare workers, by family members, and the judiciary, but women are also being, denied control over their bodies, and the autonomy is being stripped away gradually by patriarchy. It's worse if you are a poor woman living in a rural area, which has been the case for most of the infanticide or murder cases, at least in Fiji. Now, restrictive abortion laws and even, criminalization of abortion creates a very, very punishing, very, punitive sort of environment where so many of our human rights are routinely violated. This violates our right to life, freedom, dignity, right to health, right to privacy, right to sexual and reproductive health, right to freedom of conscience, and to, be free from discrimination and any other forms of ill treatment. And this is the kind of, restrictive and oppressive, sexual and reproductive environment that force women and girls to continue unwanted pregnancies, not to seek emergency, contraceptive pills, or even for emergency contraceptive pills not to be widely promoted and only promoted in the case of rape. And this results in situations such as the case I shared, or compelling women to resort to unsafe abortions. And all of this combined, like, the knowing this kind of laws exist, the kind of mental and emotional impact it has, the way it manifests in our communities, in our families, the kind of, all of this combined has an impact on, our agency, our self-esteem, our confidence, our bodily autonomy. So this all affects us in so many different ways, and sometimes, we may not realize it, but through our actions, it becomes more evident. Maybe to round off just this part of the discussion, the criminalization of the restrictions, the stigmatization around sexuality and reproduction, this is one of the many ways in which patriarchy controls and oppresses women, queer bodies, all our bodies. It limits, it controls our pleasure, it controls how people access sexual and reproductive health information and services, and the decisions people make regarding pregnancy and whether and when, whether to become pregnant or not, or when to become pregnant, or how many kids to have, whether this is insane, and with this kind of patriarchal restrictions, moralistic stigmatization around sexuality and reproductive rights. It is around same-sex relationships. It's around abortion, conduct during pregnancy, sex work, or even policies that we see people are now making at government workplaces around affairs, extramarital affairs, which are disproportionately targeted against women. So our autonomy and agency are being violently taken away through such restrictions and criminalizations, and it does deny us our human dignity. I don't want to be now providing all this critique and not touching on, what can we, do as moving forward. The two things that I want to share is around pleasure revolution and the power of erotics. So the power of erotics is all from the amazing work of Audre Lorde, who was a Black feminist poet. So maybe just around, pleasure revolution, remembering that patriarchy, through different ways controls our bodies, whether it's queer bodies, trans people's bodies, women's bodies. It controls our pleasure, whether it is through weaponizing religious groups or cultural practices. There is, different forms of control that exist, and even through different laws in our country that ban the sale or import of sex toys, or the way morality is used to police women and their sexuality. For instance, if a person is known, to be, having, many sexual partners or enjoying sex, if it's a man, we'll say, oh, he's a stud. Whereas for women, it's like, oh, she's such a slut. So this kind of like, thinking, and many of us have been socialized into this kind of thinking, but it's very highly prevalent still in a lot of our communities. So I think we really need to focus on the pleasure revolution, about the radical work that we all must do in our spaces, in our own personal spaces, in our community spaces, to reclaim our whole satisfiable selves from the impacts of oppression and supremacy, that we all need and deserve pleasure, and that our social structures must reflect this. It is about celebrating sex and sexuality. It is about safety, desire, and joy. And it is really the sex that women really want. So I think that pleasure revolution is something that we need to start, doing and talking and advocating more around. Now, moving on finally to just share a few things around the power of erotics by Audre. You can read her work online, and I'm just pulling out some parts of her work to share with you today. She says, and I completely agree with her through all my lived experiences and the work we do, and I'm sure many of you would relate to this, but erotics has been misnamed by patriarchy and always used against women. It has been made into something that is, confused or maybe trivial, or even labeled as psychotic or the plasticized sensation when women experience erotics. And we have often turned away from the exploration and consideration of the erotic as a source of our power within, and the information that's out there sometimes, through patriarchal structures, it tries to confuse us and conflate it with pornography. But pornography is a direct denial of the power of erotic, for it represents the suppression of true feelings, and it emphasizes sensation without the feeling. Whereas erotics is about the sensation and the feelings. And it's not only about the bedroom, it's about being in touch as I said, with the power within ourselves, and allowing that power to inform and highlight or illuminate our actions upon the world around us, that we begin to be responsible to ourselves in the deepest sense, that we recognize our feelings, that that we give up of being satisfied with suffering and self-negation. Like, we said, that's it, we're done. We're not going to, continue blaming ourselves and suffering. It's like giving up the numbness, which so often seems like, our only alternative in our communities and society. And I like how, her work is summed as, as feeling, as knowledge, as power, and as concerted action. So it's a way of feeling in the work we do, and where possible, new knowledge about our own self and about the environment we work in, particularly to counteract patriarchal oppression. There is a summary that has been shared on our work. It is, and I just want to share that in conclusion, that erotic is a source of power by providing vision and energy for actions that include our different interests, our different identities, and our different commitments, our multiple commitments. It's about concerted action and about coalition by enhancing our appreciation of interest and value, of the different interest and value, while fostering or encouraging or building fully embodied personal connections that, build trust based on a shared vulnerability. And then, the erotic power or the erotic helps build, coalitions across many different diversities where genuine differences of perspective and experiences can be, examined, and we look at it, and we can resist together against society's distortions about erotism, but also about what it means to be us, to be our authentic selves. So it is about resisting, it is about insisting, and it is about persisting and existing. So yes, so these were just some of the reflections that I wanted to share with you all today. And I'm hoping that in the discussions, we can bring out a lot more discussions on maybe the different things I've put out there. So Vinaka Vakalevu, and passing over to Tamani.